Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. With the State Fair in Oklahoma City in full swing and the Tulsa State Fair just around the corner, we want to begin today with some livestock safety tips to keep in mind while you're at the fair and for when you return home. Here's Dr. Rosslyn Bigs.
Well, as our 4-H and FFA exhibitors and even some of our open show exhibitors start to prepare for our state fairs and fall shows really this year, I think it's important to consider biosecurity really before, during, and after the event. Definitely need to have a visit with their veterinarian on what are the herd health care plan for those particular animals. Do we need to have vaccinations? Do we need to be prepared? Do we need to have medications on set and ready to go in case we have an issue at the show or not? And then we need to think about how we're going to isolate as best possible those animals at the show, as well as equipment. We want to avoid sharing equipment, particularly things like water buckets, feed pans, etc. And then we need to think about what's our plan before we ever leave the house on what we're going to do when we get home. So ideally, we want to keep those animals that attended the show. At a minimum, we want to keep them isolated from the rest of the group at home. We've got lots of families with, youth exhibits, but they also have commercial herds that are on the place as well. And so we want to keep those show animals isolated for about 2 weeks as best possible for both contact, as well as we don't want to be the carrier of disease from sick animals to healthy animals. And so we want to make sure we care for anything that's healthy first, care for those sick animals last. For our show exhibitors, we would encourage you to take a look at, we had a great series last year on biosecurity in those show animals on our Ranchers Thursday lunchtime series at beef.okstate.edu. We also have some other resources on our Extension website too.
Well, fertilizer prices are high and the soil is dry. Now, Brian, people with dual purpose systems, they might be sweating a bit right now.
Yeah, I mean, really, we're looking at what do we do about this situation and looking at nitrogen. It's not cheap. We got to look at it right now. If we don't get rain soon, we're not really going to have a lot of fall production. We're really looking at that. And so when we're looking at the dual purpose, the goal is to produce forage and then to produce grain, and it kind of shifts how we want to do nitrogen management. It means we need nitrogen for that start to get that early production. So the recommendation still holds with this. We need some nitrogen down if we're hoping for a dual purpose. Even if we're dusting it in, we want 50 to 60 pounds down. Don't put 120 pounds down now because we don't really know what our fall is going to look like. Put 50 or 60 pounds of nitrogen down now with your pre-plant so you have that available for that growth. If the fall turns out beautiful and we get the rain soon and we start having this great growth, then you come in somewhere in the season, winter, early spring, and top dress. The value will be there and you're easily going to pay for that additional application cost.
So is it fair to say that this season is primarily going to be a grain-only system for most producers?
We're in that point now where we don't know. If we don't get rain for a significant period of time, those dual purpose are probably not going to have the forage production they want until spring when it's time to pull off anyways. So we're in that time frame, we're really shifting our pattern from a dual purpose to grain only. The graze out producers will stay in that graze out more than likely. They'll put it in and take that forage whenever they get the opportunity to take the forage.
So now would be a good time for people to get those soil tests in.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have a soil test, there's still opportunity. If you have one, let's look at it right now. So with fertilizer prices high, especially phosphorus, there's a lot of people looking at, do I still want to put that high phosphate down? If I do, can I cut it? Looking for those cost savings. But there are a couple things we can look at as we look at managing phosphorus. One, if you have the capability to ban phosphorus, ban it. That means concentrating it in furrow with the seed. We could cut rates by 33% when we banned versus the broadcast incorporated because we're much more efficient. Also, especially if you're hoping for forage production, look at that soil test very closely if you're banding with it, because if you're on the verge of needing phosphorus, so let's say you're at a soil test of 60 or your pH is not quite right on a composite, that's more than likely meaning 50% of the ground will respond to phosphorus. So a little bit of banded phosphorus will go a long way across the entire field, and it'll help normalize some of the acidity. It'll reduce the impact of the aluminum in those low pH areas. So banding phosphorus, even when DAP and MAP prices are high like they are now, still has a pretty solid return on investment, even if you only put 15 to 20 pounds of phosphorus in furrow.
So with conditions how they are, would you say it's more important than ever this year, especially, to have an enriched strip?
Absolutely. With the conditions we have right now, we've had such an interesting year, I guess you could say, as far as rainfall patterns and growth patterns, and not wanting, everybody doesn't want to spend money on nitrogen, and the way to do that is put out the enriched strip. We could have another one of those falls where we get a ton of rainfall in October, November, and leach it all out, and it's not there for the grain. Hold back on that pre-plant. Get out an enriched strip. Go talk to your county educator and talk to them about getting access to a push spreader and a green seeker, and let's do nitrogen right and make you the most money possible.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Brian Arnall, Soil Nutrition Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. The rainfall hiatus continues for most of Oklahoma. It has been weeks since a good soaking rain benefited most of the state. As of Wednesday, the weekly rainfall totals were slim to none unless you lived in Ottawa and Delaware counties. The short-term prospects don't give us much hope of the dry pattern turning around anytime soon. One bit of good news was the midweek cold front that at least temporarily drove out the unseasonably hot temperatures. This is the low temperatures for Wednesday morning, dropping all the way down into the 30s in the Panhandle. We even had a wind chill effect that started being calculated when temperatures are below 50 degrees. This front brought an end to at least a month with daily highs running above the long-term average. You can see that on this graph with the expected average being shown in the blue fill and the actual daily highs shown by the line. We don't expect the summer-like heat to stay away for long. In fact, by the weekend, it is expected to return into the 90s. This will likely put us back up to about 7 degrees or more above normal, which statewide would normally be around 83 degrees. Gary is up next with long-term rainfall maps and the newest drought picture.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, have you had enough rain to last you for the last couple of months? If you have gotten rain, you're one of the lucky ones, because most of us have been high and dry. With the rapid onset of drought, what we call a flash drought, let's get straight to the new drought monitor map and see what we have. Well, now we have an explosion of drought from the last couple of weeks over the state of Oklahoma, with now more than half the state covered in moderate drought, a few areas of that severe drought a little bit darker brown color, and up in far northwest Oklahoma in northwestern Harper County, we have a little spot of extreme drought, that little red dot, and that, of course, is threatening to spread even more. And then we see the yellow areas, which are areas going into drought if they don't get rainfall, abnormally dry conditions. If we go to the Mesonet rainfall maps for the last 60 days, really when this dry period did start to take shape, we see the problem. Now, there are a few areas with these oranges and reds where they've gotten 5, 6, 7, even greater amounts of rainfall, but most areas are under, 2 to 3 inches, so those greens and those blues, those are areas that have gone high and dry for the most part, with just enough rainfall to barely keep the ground wet a time or two. That really starts to show up when we look at the departure from normal rainfall map for the last 60 days. Again, most areas over the last 2 months from 2 to 4 inches below normal, but some areas greater than 5 and 6 inches below normal. Very few areas above normal, really just down in far southeastern Oklahoma. They're the only ones that really had a surplus over that time frame. But hopefully we can get some rains in here later in the fall, cut some of this drought out, and keep us from extending that into the rest of the year. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're joined now by Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. Kim, let's just kind of start with an overview of what's happening in the markets.
I think most of what's happening into the crop markets is outside the markets, and the big thing is China. You know, there's one housing company over there that had a $40 billion note come due this week that they cannot pay. Looks like on Wednesday, China infused some more money into the banking system. They extended the debt time and changed the interest rates on those loans. But China's having financial problems, and they have a weak economy right now, and I think the world's nervous about that. And China, you know, they're a big supplier of products all around the world, and they're a big user of products around the world. And something going on in China has an impact on the market. We saw it on the stock market, we saw it on crop markets, we saw it on just about every market source recovery normally at the end of the week when they delayed it. But that's still going to be weighing on people's mind. You look at the Fed, the news out of the Fed, they're trying to decide when to stop doing a large-scale purchase of bonds, when to slow down buying bonds, maybe raise interest rate. I think that's on the mind of the market, and that creates volatility. And you know, those interest rates, higher interest rates, and then you've got input costs, fertilizer costs, some of them have doubled in price. And so that's weighing heavy on the market. So there's a lot going on outside what's going on with corn, beans, and wheat.
Well, what about wheat prices? Are we still seeing declines?
It's slowly wallowing its way down. Now, you look at wheat prices, they've fallen about 30 cents over the last couple of weeks, down around $6.65, which historically is a relatively good price. There's still uncertainty with what Russia's wheat crop's going to be. Those estimates on that are anywhere from 2.6 to almost 2.9 billion bushels. That's a 300 million bushel spread, and every bushel above 2.6 billion is going on the market, going on the export market, impact prices. You got transportation costs and the uncertainty of transportation. That's hitting both wheat, corn, and beans. And then you've got European Union crop, a big crop, relatively low test weight. Both Egypt and China have lowered their quality requirements and buying EU wheat.
How about harvest pressure for the corn and soybean markets?
Well, we've only got 12-15% of the corn crop harvested. It's starting to roll pretty good. Some uncertainty in the production there. I think that's having some pressure on prices as that comes on. And then you've got the prices falling off just a little bit, around $5.05 for the cash market, $5.20 on the futures market. That futures December contracts trading between $5 and $5.40, and it's around $5.20 now.
And how about cotton prices? Are they still holding steady?
Cotton prices, they've fallen from 94 down to 89. I think that's mostly the China situation, maybe some higher production around the world. They're back up to around 91, but we've starting to see a little volatility in that cotton, and I think it's forces outside what's going on with cotton per se.
Quite a bit happening. What specifically should we be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think producers just need to get mechanical marketing strategies. They can watch price, but remember, nobody can predict what's going on in prices. When you see a 30-cent up or down move in corn or wheat prices, or a 50-cent move in bean prices, you can't guess what the market's going to do. So get a mechanical strategy and then stagger in your sales over time.
Okay, sounds great, Kim. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Good morning, Oklahoma. Welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week we follow up on the topic of what we discussed last week when we covered some basic information we could collect on our cows at the time we're weaning off calves. We can look at some of these things that indicate to us what's going on in our cow herd in terms of reproductive performance, genetics, what aspects of our management look like they're really good at this part of production or maybe lacking at another part. And these equations that we're going to talk about and some of these calculations come out of Chapter 4 of our 8th edition of the Beef Cattle Manual. And we always say they're beneficial because if we can take a look at certain barometers of performance year after year, knowing that in certain years there's going to be more environmental stress, different kinds of weather, but in the same cow herd, managed pretty much the same way year after year, some of these things are telltale signs of what we're doing really well and maybe leading to additional profit potential, and also telltale signs of some areas where we may need to do a little better. First, when we discuss just the percentage of our exposed females that are getting bred. If we want to look at this number, right now as we diagnose pregnancy status in cows this time of year, we take the number that are pregnant, divide that by the number of females that we started the breeding season with back in the spring, take that, multiply it by 100, we get a percentage. Obviously, that's the percentage we want to see as high as possible. It means that fertility has taken place, we had ample bull power, our cows are getting bred. That's one guideline we can take a look at. A second thing we can take a look at over the course of production is the percentage of calves that we are losing. We can look at this in a couple ways. We can look at the amount of death loss in calves per exposed female. We can take a look at the amount of death loss in calves relative to how many were actually born at the beginning of breeding season. Either way you look at that, again, it's informative. It helps us to make better decisions and potentially identify some areas we can do a better job of managing in. Another number to take a look at is our percent calf crop weaned. It is a good index of overall herd productivity. It is actually taking into account those first couple of calculations that I addressed, because not only is fertility and how many cows got pregnant, as well as how many calves were born and how many of those actually survived a weaning, all that is fitting into this percent calf crop wean. Typically, percent calf crop weans are indicative that we're doing a lot of things right in terms of cow herd management, genetics, nutrition is going to lead into weaning off healthy calves and getting cows to do that within a 12-month period. In the end, it's everything looked at together that can be informative and help us make decisions on management, marketing, and increase cow herd profit potential in commercial cow-calf operations. More details on these calculations and what they're telling us can be found in Chapter 4 of our newest edition of the Beef Cattle Manual. I encourage producers to take a look at that if they're curious. And that's all for this week. We'll continue on this topic again next week. Thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner.
Now to our OSU Extension beef cattle specialist, Dr. Paul Beck, inviting you to an upcoming field day aimed at providing solutions during these hectic times.
Beef producers in Oklahoma, across the state, are facing a lot of challenges with uncertainty of the weather and the cattle markets, increasing cost of production, associated with diesel and feed and fertilizer. And these increased costs have put a lot of pressure on profitability of our farms, along with uncertainty of weather conditions and decreased fear of decreasing range conditions. We've currently got issues with localized drought in many of our wheat production areas in the state. That's kept people from planting early to get fall grazing in our dual purpose wheat programs. We're conducting research in western Oklahoma that we're going to highlight at a field day at the Clemmy Range Research Station, looking at supplementation programs to help offset some of the price pressures and unsure forage conditions, and improve performance and total output from the ranch, along with ways to change grazing distribution and more fully utilize our pastures. This field day is scheduled for September the 29th. We're going to tour the facilities and look at some animal science, along with some of the Natural Resources Department grazing distribution and patch burning research that they've been conducting out at that research station. So the supplementation research that we're doing at Clemmy can help find producers a way to bridge a gap between summer grazing for their stockers and whenever wheat pasture becomes available. For more information on this field day, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
They may be rivals on the football field this weekend, but Oklahoma State and Kansas State have some important connections when it comes to wheat breeding and agriculture in general.
Our collaboration over the years has been deep and significant in terms of the products of that collaboration. We can look at the varieties, the wheat varieties in the field today that have K-State influence and germplasm in their pedigrees. Of course, we have to go back to Jagger.
Jagger is one that was developed at K-State, but testing in Oklahoma, and that was grown over a broad geography. We see that sort of thing with a number of the varieties. We've tested things like Gallagher and Double Stop, and that's helped support those varieties being grown in Kansas. Things like Overley has moved into Oklahoma and been a parent of a couple of lines that Brett's had.
Perhaps the one that's most notable is Showdown, is a grandson of Jagger, and then we have Breakthrough, which really was a breakthrough in putting wheat streak mosaic resistance into our wheat varieties, and that could not have happened without the original work being done at K-State. The spirit of collaboration has been very productive, of course, but on the same hand, or really on the other hand, is we're also competing against each other.
I think as plant breeders, I mean, I don't know that people think of that as highly competitive, but it certainly is, and we certainly want to. I think we each want to kick everybody else's tail, and I think that's a healthy thing for our producers. And I'm sure that Brett wants to whoop me, and I would like to whoop Brett, but it's a friendly competition. We're really working for the betterment of our producers.
And so the new kind of collaboration would be, well, let's continue our competition, but let's make it a little bit more co-productive.
Each program needs to retain its independence, but are there ways that we can work together? And then I think over the longer haul, I think we both have a passion for seeing increased value to our producers so that wheat is a more viable crop.
Instead of just sharing germplasm with each program and then running off and doing whatever you want to do with the germplasm, let's now take a more strategic approach and co-create the progenies.
So I think discussing ways that we can facilitate that are ways that we can do that together.
But still, do it in a way that now helps us both out. There's some places where the competition is going to remain, so.
We're hoping for a good game, but we also know that Oklahoma State's got a pretty good team too.
In that respect, go Pokes.
So Daryl, we just saw a story with the partnership with the teams at Kansas State and OSU in regards to wheat, but you also have a long-standing relationship with Kansas State in regards to livestock.
Yeah, that's right. We have a long history of collaboration on research and extension programs between the Ag Econ departments at Kansas State University and Oklahoma State University.
So talk about, why is that important? Why is having a relationship between two universities so important?
Well, I think it really, it contributes to our regional efforts jointly. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap between the two states. There's a lot of complementarity in our situations and the kinds of things we're facing. So, when we do, radio interviews, I do, the K-State Radio Network, or I've done that for a number of years as one of several analysts that contribute to that. And that just helps us reach, I think, more effectively. It really just leverages both of our efforts in the two states.
So now let's shifting back to livestock markets. How is the hay and forage situation shaping up? It's really, really dry right now.
It is getting pretty dry, but of course, it's late in the summer. It's this time of the year. Oklahoma's pasture and range conditions are actually still rated as good as anybody in the central and southern plains. So, we're not in too bad a shape, even though it is getting pretty dry. It may affect the wheat pasture situation and some of our fall forages, certainly. On the hay side, we don't have any real data yet on hay production, but anecdotally what I see and hear as I travel around and talk to folks is that it looks to me like in this immediate area we've put up a lot of hay. I think hay supplies are going to be pretty adequate.
Well, so the drought picture might not be affecting Oklahoma right now, but 2 weeks ago when we had you on, drought was really affecting just the United States as a whole. So how is that affecting livestock markets now?
Well, it's potentially having some impacts on that. It's certainly having an impact on these hay markets as we talk about. And so, hay prices are going up even in Oklahoma. Even if supplies are pretty good, hay prices are somewhat higher here. The last USDA data was actually from July, but compared to the previous year, hay prices in Oklahoma were up over 14%. Now, if you compare that to, say, North and South Dakota, hay prices are up 80 to 90% up there. So obviously it's much more severe up there. And we may see, we may see these hay markets actually, move some hay, and they could reach as far south as the southern plains.
So grain prices still really high. What are some challenges other than grain prices that producers are going to face for winter feed costs?
Well, we just talked about the fact that hay prices are going up, so that's going to be an issue for producers. If they've got their own hay, then they may not be buying it, but that hay's worth more, so they need to think about where that value is and how to capture that. They will need some winter supplement, protein supplement, possibly some energy supplement, and those prices are going to be higher. So I think producers do want to do a little bit of planning and some pencil work to figure out the best way to get through the winter. There will clearly be higher feed costs this winter.
So will all these challenges impact, the cow culling decisions going forward?
Well, it might. Noting that we've got higher feed costs this year, producers may want to think about whether they want to cull maybe a little bit extra heavy, not keep those cows. On the other hand, if they've got lots of hay, they may be in a position to keep more cull cows, or they may be thinking about keeping their calves. So I think there's just lots of decisions relative to what your hay supply situation is, what your forage situation is, and then look at these opportunities relative to both calf and the cull cow markets.
Alrighty, thanks, Daryl. Dr. Daryl Pill, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can see us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.